Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Henson and Ratburger. Welcome back. We're on chapter 15 and 16 today. I wonder what Zoe's going to do. I wonder whether she'll follow Raj's advice and let Armitage go. Shall we find out? Here we go then, chapter 15, 10-ton truck. So, this was goodbye. Zoe knew deep down that she would never be able to keep Armitage for long. There were 100 reasons, but the most important was he was a rat. Children don't have rats as pets. They have cats and dogs and hamsters and gerbils and guinea pigs and mice and rabbits and terrapins and tortoises. Posh ones even sometimes have ponies. But never rats. Rats live in sewers, not little girls' bedrooms. Zoe trudged miserably out of Raj's shop. The newsagent may sometimes try and sell his customers a half-eaten chocolate bar or put a partially sucked toffee bonbon back in the sweet jar. But all the local kids knew that when it came to advice, he was the best. And that meant she had to say goodbye to Armitage. Zoe took the long way back to her flats through the park. Zoe thought this would be the perfect place to set little Armitage free. There would be crusts of bread left out for the ducks for him to eat, a pond for him to drink from, or maybe even take the occasional bath in, and perhaps there was a squirrel or two whom he could befriend, or at least one day be on nodding terms with. The little girl carried the little rat in her hand for the last part of the journey. As it was the middle of the afternoon, the park was all but empty, save a few old ladies being walked by their dogs. Armitage wrapped his tail around her thumb. It was almost as if he sensed something was amiss, and he clung on to her little fingers as tightly as he could. Trudging along as slowly as possible, Zoe eventually reached the middle of the park. She stopped a good distance from the yapping dogs and hissing swans and barking park keeper. She slowly crouched down on the ground and unclosed her hand. Armitage didn't move. It was as if Armitage didn't want to be parted from his new friend. He cuddled up to her hand, breaking Zoe's heart as he did. Zoe shook her little hand, but this only made him grip tighter with his little tail and toes. Fighting back tears, she picked at the rat gently by the fur on the back of his neck and placed him carefully on the grass. Once again, Armitage did not move. Instead, he just looked up at Zoe longingly. Zoe knelt down and kissed him gently on his little pink nose. "Goodbye, little fellow," she whispered. "I am going to miss you." A tear dropped from her eye. It landed on Armitage's whiskers, and his tiny pink tongue slipped out to catch it. The little rat tilted his head to one side, as if trying to understand her, which just made it harder for Zoe. In fact, saying goodbye was so unbearably sad she just couldn't take it anymore. Zoe took a deep breath and stood up and promised herself she would not look back. That promise lasted only a dozen steps, as she couldn't help stealing a glance one last time to spot where she'd left him. To Zoe's surprise, Armitage was already gone. He must have scampered off to the safety of the bushes, she thought. She scoured the nearby grass for signs of movement, but it was tall and he was short, and apart from a light breeze blowing the tips, the grass didn't move. So he turned round and reluctantly headed home. Leaving the park, she crossed the road. For a moment it was free of the hum of cars, and in the silence Zoe thought she heard a tiny eek. She spun round, and in the middle of the road was Armitage. He had been following her all along. "Armitage!" she exclaimed excitedly. He didn't want to be free. He wanted to be with her. She was so glad. She had been imagining all kinds of awful scenarios from the moment she left him behind, like Armitage being gobbled up by a vicious swan, or wandering into the road and being hit by a 10-ton truck. At that moment, Something came thundering along the road towards Armitage, who was still scampering slowly across to join Zoe. It was a 10-ton truck. Zoe stood frozen, watching the truck speeding closer and closer towards Armitage. The driver would never spot a baby rat in the road, and Armitage would be flattened and be nothing more than a splat on the tarmac. "No!" cried Zoe, but the truck thundered on. There was nothing she could do. Armitage looked in the direction of the truck, realising he was in trouble, started scampering back and forth across the road. The little rat was in a terrible panic, but if Zoe ran into the road, she would be flattened too. It was too late. The truck roared over him, and Zoe covered her eyes with her hands. Rumble! There's the big rumble. Only when she could hear the truck's engines fading into the distance did Zoe dare open her eyes again. She looked for a splat on the road, but it wasn't there. What was there was Armitage, a little shaken perhaps, but alive. The lorry's giant tyres must have missed him. Looking right and left and right again to check there were no cars, Zoe ran into the road and scooped him up. "I'm not letting you go, ever," said Zoe. She held him close. Armitage let out a loving little eek. Let's carry on with chapter 16. Chapter 16, the blackberry bush. Nature finds a way to create life everywhere. In a smelly alleyway that connected the road to Zoe's estate, among all the crisp wrappers and empty beer cans, stood a proud little blackberry bush. Zoe loved blackberries. They were like free sweets. She was pretty sure Armitage would like them too. She picked a large one for herself and a little one for her furry friend. Carefully, she placed the baby rat onto the wall. As Armitage watched, Zoe put the blackberry into her mouth and started chewing enthusiastically and making appreciative noises. Then she took the smaller blackberry between her thumb and her forefinger and held it out towards him. Armitage must have been hungry because he slowly stood up on his hind leg to greet it. Zoe was delighted. The rat took the blackberry between its front paws and nibbled it greedily. It was gone in seconds. Soon he was looking longingly up at Zoe for another one. She picked another one off the bush and held it up just above his nose. Without hesitation, Armitage stood up on his hind legs again. Zoe moved the blackberry around and he followed it around on his back legs. It was as if he was doing a little dance. "What a talented little fellow you are," said Zoe as she gave him the blackberry. Once again he ate it greedily and Zoe stroked the back of his neck. "Good boy." Inside she was buzzing with excitement. Armitage could be trained. Better still, it was like he wanted to be. He'd got the idea of standing up even quicker than Ginger had. Soon Zoe was plucking as many blackberries off the bush as she could. Just as she had with her hamster, she began teaching Armitage some tricks. There was the walk, the jump, the hop on one leg, the wave, and the dance. And there he is. Soon the bush was bare, and Armitage looked rather stuffed and tired. Zoe knew it was time to stop. She whisked him up in her arms and gave him a little kiss on the nose. "You're amazing, Armitage. That's what I will call you when we perform together on stage. The amazing Armitage." Zoe skipped down the alleyway. Her heart was dancing, as were her feet. It was only when Zoe reached her estate that the spring in her step vanished. Not only would she have to tell her stepmother she was suspended, she would have to come up with some explanation as to why. The whole episode would give her stepmother a reason to make Zoe's life even more of a living hell. And what was a million times worse, a reason to end the little rat's life, a life that had only just begun. As Zoe approached the great leaning tower block, she noticed something peculiar. Bert's burger van was parked right outside her tower block of flats. In the many years she had lived there since her mother died, she had never seen the van before. It was only ever parked outside of her school. What on earth is that doing there, she thought. Even from a distance, the smell of fried meat was stomach-churning. However hungry Zoe was, she had never bought a burger from Bert's van. The stench alone was enough to make her want to projectile vomit. The ketchup was decidedly iffy too. Passing the van, she noticed how disgustingly grimy it was. Even the dirt was dirty. Zoe ran her index finger along the chassis, and a splodge of sludge an inch thick came off in her hand. Perhaps Bert has just moved into the block of flats, she thought. She hoped not, though, as he was seriously creepy. Bert was the sort of man your nightmares had nightmares about. The tiny flat was high up on the 37th floor, but the lift always stank. You had to hold your breath in there, which wasn't easy over 37 floors. So, Zoe would always take the stairs. Armitage was safely lying in her blazer pocket, and she could feel the weight of his tiny body bounce against her heart with every step. Her breathing grew louder and louder as she ascended the building. The stairs were littered with all kinds of rubbish, from cigarette butts to empty bottles. The steps stank too, but not as much as the lift, and of course you weren't so closed in. As usual, by the time Zoe reached the 37th floor, she was completely breathless and panting like a dog. Zoe stood outside the front door for a moment, pausing to catch her breath before she put the key in the lock. The headmaster, Mr. Grave, would no doubt have called her parents to tell them their daughter had been suspended. Within seconds, Zoe was sure to let loose her stepmother's fury, a fury no doubt more rabid than 1,000 hounds of hell. Zoe silently twisted the key and reluctantly pushed the rotting door open. Even though her stepmother rarely went out, the TV was off and Zoe couldn't hear anyone in the house. So she tiptoed across the hall to her bedroom, being careful to avoid the squeakiest floorboards. She turned the door handle to her room and stepped inside. A strange man was standing in her bedroom facing the window. "Ah!" Zoe screamed, startled. The man turned round. It was Bert. Oh my goodness. What a twist and turn in the tale today. So Zoe let Armitage go. Armitage followed her. She took him back. And now no one's at home but Bert. What on earth is he doing there? I have no idea. Well, I hope you enjoyed those two chapters. We'll be on to chapter 17 and 18 next week. We're halfway through this book already. Isn't it flying by? But I'm really enjoying it and I hope you are too. Make sure you get onto Google Classrooms today and do all your amazing work that your teachers have set you, and we look forward to seeing all your photos of your remarkable work that you are doing. Take care and I'll see you next time. Bye, Year 4.